No hiding in the bunch today. In fact, no hiding at all. It's the individual time trial. These were the standings going into today's stage, with Igor González de Galdeano in the yellow jersey by 4 seconds from his teammate Joseba Beloki, and another half-minute ahead of the defending champion. 34 seconds divided by 52 kilometres. That was the calculation that Lance Armstrong had set himself today. It would take him just over an hour, and the right answer would give him the race lead. He started out as the strong favourite, not surprisingly, since he hadn't lost a Tour de France time trial for 3 years, and with the race lead at stake just before the key mountain stages, there was no doubt he'd be going all out in this one. As you'd expect, he'd also be going out on a meticulously prepared machine.
Well, this is it. This is the bike that Lance Armstrong will use in the individual time trial, and strangely enough it weighs in quite heavy at 9 kilos. But for Armstrong, the most important thing is not weight, it's aerodynamics and rigidity. Like most of these bikes, it's made nearly all of carbon fibre, the tubes thick and flat to cut into the wind. US Postal Service even have a fin that goes right under the saddle to reduce any friction with the wind at the back end of the machine. Armstrong has opted for a full disc wheel. That way the turbulence at the back end is reduced to a minimum. The gears he's going to use are immense, 56 or a 55 tooth chainring at the front and an 11 tooth sprocket at the back. Also at the front he's going to have a carbon fibre wheel, but this will have very thick rims and 3 spokes. They've tried to make this machine as aerodynamic as possible, and even the cables here for the brakes and the gears go right inside the tubes and come out wherever necessary. But it's the front end of the bike where the rider becomes more aerodynamic. He gets down onto these bars. Although these brakes don't look very good, they'll work very nicely going around the corners. But this is where aerodynamics comes to perfection, right down here in the middle. And I spoke to Chris Carmichael, Lance's coach. He told me Armstrong had been working very hard on the abs and the back to keep him in that aerodynamic position for longer. Hopefully on the long drags uphill, he will gain time over all of his rivals.
Well, perhaps more decisive than the inclines on this time trial route would be the home stretch, 17 or so kilometres along the Brittany coast with the wind whipping in off the sea. The best early time of 1 hour, 2 minutes and 43 seconds was set by Hungary's Laszlo Bedrogi. When Raimundas Rumsas came up the line within metres of catching 2 earlier starters, it looked as though he might have beaten it, but as it turned out, he slipped into second by 1/10 of a second. As we join it though, Santiago Botero of Kelme and Colombia is setting all the best split times.
This is really beginning to warm up as the top riders come out firing on all cylinders. Huge crowd shouting them along here now, as Botero is heading up now for the other check here. No, it's not, sorry, he's on the 2 kilometres to go now. Rumsas is in, remember, and Rumsas's time is confirmed in second place at 0 seconds because they round up to the nearest second. But he is in second place by 6/10 of a second, Paul, 3/5 of a second.
That's pretty close. It's rather unfortunate. He probably had to slow down a fraction coming into the finishing straight because he had the 2 riders in front of him, and that may well have cost him that 6/10 of a second just in the final few meters. But I had said that this man we're looking at now, right, Sergei Gonchar, it's rather strange, the pedaling action that he has. It looks rather uncomfortable and unsupple. The reason is because he's using absolutely massive gears. He doesn't turn the gears over at 100 RPM like Lance Armstrong. He turns them over around about 85, but he uses a massive gear and pushes himself along in excess of 30 miles an hour.
There is the flag just ahead for 1,000 meters to the line, and Santiago Botero, well, obviously things went a little bit wrong there for Rumsas in the last couple of kilometers, because he was 5 seconds ahead of Bedrogi with just 6 kilometers to ride, and he lost those 5 seconds. Clearly the legs just knotted up a little bit. Now let's hope the same hasn't happened here to this man from Colombia. He doesn't look like to me, he's still punching along there. He's got the time to beat 2 almost identical times of 1:2:43. He should be just outside 1:2, 1:2:10 or something like that as he comes up to the line, if he's held on to all of his gains out on the course and added a couple of seconds more. He still looks very, very good here, and this is a man, king of the mountains of the Tour de France, who is now looking for a high finish in Paris as well. It is looking very good. 1:2:43 to beat, and he surely has done that, but he's not thinking of what Bedrogi has done or Rumsas. He's just afraid of what Armstrong will do behind him. So he needs the best time possible here as he races up to the line. Well, the time I thought has just gone by. He too has found this last 6 kilometers a bit of a problem, but it's still best time. 1:2:18 for Santiago Botero.
Well, this is the man who everyone wants to see what kind of performance he's going to put in this afternoon. Over the last 9 time trials that have been at the Tour de France, Lance Armstrong has won 7 of them.
He's aiming for his 13th stage win in a Tour de France. If he gets it today, it certainly will be lucky for him, because no cyclist currently racing has won more stages in a Tour de France. There are 3 riders, Cipollini, Zabel and Armstrong, all on 12 wins. Armstrong is underway, and now what can he do with 7 riders chasing him, all on the same team? As Miller now races for a high finish, and let's hope a high place in the overall classification tonight, because he's been training specifically for the mountains, which has damaged his pure speed, he thinks, in the time trial. But even so, he's not going to get at the times of the top 4 riders. He should, in fact, he might well get into the time here of Frigo, and better that one, because Frigo's finish time is 1:3:52. Miller, though, is in 4th place at 1 hour 3 minutes for Miller. Come on, David, you need a sprint to the line here, because conceding a little bit, but David Miller, silver medalist in the World Time Trial Championships, now in 4th place with 1:3:08. Now, here's the big news. Sergei Honchar heading up towards the finish now. Is it a new best time here? He was 8 seconds behind Santiago Botero with 6 kilometers to go. Has he kept those legs punching out this enormous pedaling gear? He certainly looks as though he's moving with some speed now. He's looking to do a time of 1:2:18 if he's going to get it, but I don't think he is, Paul. That time, I think, has slipped away. Yes, it has. It has. So Honchar coming in at the moment. He should hang on to second best time. Little bit more of a sprint, Sergei. You're not quite there. As he comes up to the line, it's going to be a longer one than he anticipated. 1:2:36 for the moment. Second place for the former world time trial champion.
The problem
on the course. Jalabert, a problem with his bike as well as his helmet. Here's the situation replayed for you. Now, Paul, is it a flat tyre? I think the way he stopped it must be.
Well, he's trying to take the back wheel, but in fact it's going to take too long, and the mechanic is going to come up as quickly as possible. It looks as if he's got that stuck in there. You see, he's actually trying to unscrew that himself, and this is a very slow change for Laurent Jalabert. This is the problem with the aerodynamic bikes. The wheels and the quick release skewers have to be tightened down, and the mechanic has gone back to the car right now. This has lost Laurent Jalabert pretty close to 45 seconds right now. The spare machine is up there and running, but you know, that really breaks the rhythm once something like that happens.
The leader of the Tour de France, 5 days in yellow, Igor González de Galdeano, is now underway, and he must be asking himself the question, will he be in yellow by the time he reaches the finishing line?
Armstrong coming up to the first time check. We'll get an indication. 24:40 is the time to beat, and in fact it looked as if Lance Armstrong has gone through there in 24:46, which is rather a surprise. He has possibly started quite slow, but that was the time that I read off the top gantry over the line there at the first time check. 19.5 kilometers covered. Now that would be rather interesting.
That would be a surprise, Paul. We'll wait and get confirmation of that. Tyler Hamilton's gone through just ahead at 34 seconds. There it is, Armstrong at 6 seconds. 24:46 for Lance Armstrong. This is going to be a most intriguing end to this time trial. We are waiting for just 3 riders to arrive at 35 kilometers, and it'll be interesting to see if González de Galdeano has kept the pressure on Lance Armstrong and Santiago Botero. It'll be very interesting indeed. This is Joseba Beloki going through briefly as we return to the 3 kilometre banner now. And Armstrong, looking for a 13th stage win in a Tour de France, is keeping the rhythm going over that little rise. And once he smells the finish, he will squeeze that little bit more out of his body.
Well, he'll think about trying to knock the gear up just a little bit there. You can see on his shoulder there the bands indicating he's a former world champion. That was back when he was a 21-year-old youth in 1993. Wears number 1 on his back. He will know now that Santiago Botero has gone 5 seconds faster than him, and this is a difficult part of the course. It's very wide and open. You see Armstrong is cutting along the apexes of all the corners, trying to make his way to the finish line the shortest possible. He needs to sprint right now to try and get himself to the finishing line inside the time of 1 hour, 2 minutes and 18 seconds. But what's more important is Igor González de Galdeano out on the course has rivaled the time of Armstrong at the first time check. In fact, is much better than Armstrong's by a mere second, and in a short while, I would say around about 5 or 6 minutes, Igor González de Galdeano should get to the second time check at 35 kilometers covered at Guidel-Plage.
And Igor González de Galdeano is still the man in yellow, and he is over half distance of the time trial. So I think it's safe to assume, Paul, unless he completely cracks up, he's going to keep the race lead tonight.
By a few seconds, I would think, and it's going to be pretty dramatic then the first days in the mountains, because we may well be looking at a huge Spanish attack on the leadership of Lance Armstrong. There are some very good, strong Spanish teams in this year's Tour de France, and now that Kelme have seen the performance of their man Santiago Botero, they will try and blow the race to pieces when we go into the Pyrenees. So will this team as well, Team Once of Spain. They've got 2 very good men who have a great chance of winning the Tour de France this year, Joseba Beloki and the man we're looking at right now, Igor González de Galdeano. And if they go on the attack, you can't discount any attacks coming from Euskaltel, Euskadi and Banesto as well. But here is Armstrong right now. This is a very similar position to the position we saw last year. He knows how to win time trials. He wants to win this one. He wants to be the king of the individual effort. But right now he's got to topple the Colombian. 1:2:18 is the time to beat. At the moment on the clock it's 1:01:57. It's going to be very, very close.
Desperately close. He's looking to reverse a 5-second loss with 6 kilometers to go. There's the clock for you to see now and counting. Lance Armstrong is very close to the first or second in the time trial. He would want it to be first as he comes up to the line now. The clock is going to tell him he is not going to win the time trial. Santiago Botero has got a great scalp here as Armstrong comes up to the line. In fact, he's conceded a little bit more time on the approach to the line. As Armstrong comes up, he will be 10 seconds down. 1:2:29 for Armstrong.
Well, that is a huge surprise. 10.66 seconds he has conceded to Santiago Botero, and in fact he's lost 5 seconds over the last part. He looked as if he was riding his normal time trial today, but I think what has happened, in fact, we would have to say that Santiago Botero has ridden the time trial of his career. Now this is an important time check. This is the man who wears the yellow jersey. Started the day 34 seconds ahead of Lance Armstrong in the overall standings. His teammate has just gone through. We're here with the 8th best time, 57 seconds back, but the clock now is ticking. This is Igor González de Galdeano, starts the day in first position. The time of his crossing the line here is exceptionally important. At the first time check, he was a second ahead of Lance Armstrong. Right now, we'll get a chance to see whether or not he's able to keep that. But I think, in fact, he's gone behind Armstrong at this point.
42:23 for González de Galdeano, which means that he has indeed lost 7 seconds to Lance Armstrong. So he's over that opening sector. He's lost 8 seconds to Armstrong. Well, that means that he's made a huge effort at the start, and he might well be paying for it now. But you know, that is not enough time to lose the yellow jersey just yet, Paul.
No, it isn't. He starts the day with a 34-second advantage, and right now, if you stop the race, the 26 seconds that Lance Armstrong lost because of that crash is going to cost him the yellow jersey, possibly at the end of today. He was only 7 seconds behind this man in the overall standings when it came into the stage that finished in Avranches a few days ago. And as we have a look here at the 35-kilometer point, we get confirmation that Armstrong went through there with a brilliant time. 4th place there though for Igor González de Galdeano, 7 seconds in adrift. So he's slowing, but he's putting in a brilliant performance right now, and it's going to be very close over the last 5 kilometers as to whether or not he keeps hold of the yellow jersey.
And we'll wait for the arrival, of course, of the last man in, that's González de Galdeano, to see if he can just rise his pace in the last 6 kilometers. At the moment, it's Joseba Beloki, for the last 2 years, 3rd in the Tour de France, as he now produces the best he can on the day. It's not going to be good enough to win him any prizes, and in fact, he is going to slip away from his 2nd place overall.
Well, he's not going to win the time trial this afternoon, but is in fact laying the foundations for a high place in the overall standings. The time of 1:02:18 of Santiago Botero has long ticked by. We're well into the 1 hour and 3 minutes right now, but Joseba Beloki has done a good ride. He will finish inside the top 10, but he will slip behind Lance Armstrong in the overall standings.
And looking at the poker face of Santiago Botero is giving nothing away, and yet here he has just pulled out 1 minute 38 seconds on the man who's finished 3rd in the Tour de France for the last 2 years. Now Beloki has a lot of work to do in the mountains. His final time, looking at the clock, 1:03:56, his final time.
Well, at that point, the sheer drama of the day overloaded the French television circuits, and the climax of the stage was lost to the world's live broadcasters. In fact, these are the only pictures of Igor González de Galdeano crossing the line. It didn't affect the result, though. He came in with a time of 1:02:37, good enough for 4th and good enough to keep him in the yellow jersey. So Santiago Botero hands Lance Armstrong his first defeat in a Tour de France time trial for 4 years to take a dramatic Stage 9 win. And it wasn't a bad day for David Miller either. 7th place for him, which was good enough to retake the lead in the Best Young Rider competition. There's the result in full. Botero first, 11 seconds ahead of Armstrong, with Igor González de Galdeano 4th, comfortably inside the 34-second cushion that he had over the American at the start of the day. González de Galdeano's co-leader Joseba Beloki, though, may have ridden himself into a supporting role today. He was a disappointing 1:38 off the pace, and Laurent Jalabert's run of miserable luck continues. His bike change cost him a huge chunk of time, and he finished 43rd. Well, it may have been Armstrong's first time trial defeat in the Tour for 4 years, but it was his second to Botero in 2 months. The Colombian beat him in the Dauphiné Libre race in June.
I can't lie and say I'm not disappointed with today, because I am a little disappointed, but anyways, here we go.
Sí, bueno, la verdad es un sueño. Eso lo decía yo antes de que pasara Lance y nada, eso te da una motivación y una alegría inmensa, porque son muchos meses preparando este tour y bueno, es muy bonito tanto para el equipo como para thank you, David. Es muy bonito para nosotros y bueno, a Lance que está muy bien, entonces más mérito aún ganarle a él y a igual a Igor.
The only way to win is to take back time, and the only way to take back time is to well, there's 2 ways. There's either they crack and lose time, or you have a great day and attack and make up time. So we'll see how things go.
So this is how things stand going into the rest day. González de Galdeano has lost just 8 seconds of the 34 he had over Armstrong before the stage, but Armstrong nonetheless is up to 2nd after that less than stellar performance by Joseba Beloki. Botero's brilliant ride moves him into 4th position, and David Miller is now 7th. Stage 10 here to Pau was a warm-up day really for the big action in the Pyrenees, which begins tomorrow. Last chance for the sprinters and the breakaway merchants to grab a bit of glory before the going gets seriously diagonal. Pau, last stop before the mountains, which meant it was the last real chance for the opportunists to stage an escape and for the sprinters to pick up any big points. 35 on offer for the stage win on a flat stage, and 3 intermediate sprints along the way with 6, 4 and 2 points for the first 3 riders under the banner. Well, Eric Zabel started the day just 2 points ahead of Robbie McEwen in the green jersey competition, and at the first sprint McEwen beat him into 2nd place, with Stuart O'Grady a very close 3rd. That meant McEwen and Zabel were now level on points. There was a momentary frisson on race radio when word came through that González de Galdeano had abandoned, but it was Igor's brother Álvaro who'd been struggling with a thigh injury. There's only one Botero in the race though, and he dropped off the back early in the stage with a puncture before a couple of Kelme teammates helped pace him back to the bunch. On the rest day, the great Laurent Jalabert had announced that he was quitting at the end of the season. For the second stage running, his bike decided to take early retirement. In fact, he got through 3 by the end of the stage. And it was a blisteringly fast stage, which was surprising for the day before the Pyrenees. Finally, after several failed efforts, a break of 11 riders, though, did manage to get away. In it was Stuart O'Grady, who took second place at the second sprint and first place at the third. Not enough to challenge the leaders, but handy points in the bag for the man who'd started the day fourth in the green jersey competition.
So there's the 4 leaders. Good wide roads now as we course our way into Pau. It's seen the arrival of the Tour de France on so many occasions, always giving us a great winner. This will be the 57th time, I think, that we've come to Pau.
These guys are all still sharing the turns at the front. You can see O'Grady forcing the pace at the front end of the main field. It is so important for these riders right now. There's a move and it's coming by Algon. Algon trying to surprise everybody. They need to respond. O'Grady's waiting for somebody else. This is a dangerous thing to do.
Well, somebody's got to go, and he might have done it here with 8 to go because O'Grady looked and didn't react. Now they've got to sort it out. They've got time to go and recover. They've forced Dirksen to take up the chase. Interesting to note, Paul, that the Frenchman, Pinot, made absolutely no effort to go and chase down a Frenchman on a rival team.
Well, that's good. If they want to try and get themselves the victory, they need to forget about team rivalry right now and maybe think about national pride. The French would certainly like to get themselves a win, and Algon there has opened up a huge advantage. I think the 2 men who will have to work very hard will have to be Ludo Dirksen and Stuart O'Grady. Everybody in this group knew that O'Grady was the fastest man, and I'm surprised that Ludo Dirksen didn't respond to that attack because it was in a position in the group where everybody could see it happening.
Well, that's a mistake. Watch this now. A perfect choice off the back wheel of Dirksen's. Waited till O'Grady was on the front. Dirksen's in the best position to respond and didn't. The Frenchman had no intention of responding, and the one man he feared, Stuart O'Grady, was in the right position, or in O'Grady's case, the wrong position when he put the attack in. Crowd lining them what is normally a main highway here as we race into Pau, closed down of course for the arrival of the Tour de France. This race still catches the public's imagination like no other sporting event in France. This is the main Route Nationale 134 now, which we follow all of the way down to the finishing line in Pau. He will know these roads. 4 kilometers to go. Take another one off, and these are the 3 pursuers. The youngest man in the Tour, Frank Pinot, he goes through, followed by Ludo Dirksen. And Stuart O'Grady is going to have to think of second place, which is not inconsiderable. It's still 30 points for the green jersey.
Well, I think the reason Jérôme Pinot at the back didn't go there when that attack went, because he's absolutely on the rivet right now. He was just happy to be in this leading breakaway. This man is pedaling with absolute urgency, trying to survive. He stretches his advantage right now. The last time check we got was 15 seconds over the race radio. These long, slight uphill drags into the outskirts of Pau will shortly be put behind him when he comes onto the finishing place here in the Place de Verdun, a place where the Tour de France has finished in Pau many times in the past. The last man to win here was David Echavarria, and in fact, strangely enough, Echavarria was in the breakaway today, but it wasn't the same one. It was Unai, and he unfortunately is caught in no man's land between the breakaways and the main field, who are still a fair way behind.
Yes, I think he'll hang on there. The field has now disappeared off our computer, so I'm not sure what the time gap is anymore. As we now look at the 3 chasers coming under 3 kilometers to go, and if anything, they're losing ground to Patrice Algol. The last time check for the peloton we got was 4 minutes and 28 seconds, and we do believe that Echavarria is still ahead of them and racing for what would be in effect the last place of the breakaway on the day, which would be 11th.
Well, 3 kilometers to go. Patrice Algol here from the Jean de la Tour team. He's the leader of the team. In fact, had still 15 seconds advantage. And those guys behind, they must be kicking themselves that they didn't respond. When you've been in a long breakaway like this and somebody attacks towards the end, you have to respond instantaneously without even thinking about it, because once the guy gets a slight advantage psychologically, it is so very difficult to pull him back into the fold.
Well, what a wonderful feeling it is if you're a Frenchman racing into the great city of Pau, part of the history and the annals of the Tour de France, and you're clear and you're carrying all of France and the cheers, because no Frenchman has won a stage this year. He's doing it now though, because these three riders are hitting the psychological banner now. 2 kilometers to go, because once you're under that you start to think of second place. This rider though is thinking of first, and he has got it all under control. 28 years of age, fairly late on he turned pro as a roadman in 1995, and he's now going to add a win in the Tour de France.
Well, Stewie O'Grady, look at that, right on the front of his saddle right now. He must have dreamed a few kilometers ago that he was going to get himself another stage victory in the Tour de France. Pinot just indicating to Ludo Dirksen's come by on the right hand side, keep the tempo going, but this man has flown the coop right now. When you get to a situation like this and you've been away for so long, the legs are absolutely burning, the pain is there, but the knowledge that you are going to get yourself the victory allows you to push the pain barrier just a little bit further in front, a little bit out of bounds, and you can sustain that pain for just a bit longer, especially if you're a Frenchman on the roads of the Tour de France. And right in front of him there is the red kite, 1,000 meters to the finish line.
This has got to be, if you're an athlete at this level, one of the finest feelings in the world as you hit the 1 kilometer to go banner. 1,000 meters from glory, the first French winner of the stage of the Tour this year. He briefly held the lead in the King of the Mountains last year. That was his first Tour de France. He finally finished 55th in Paris, and he's looking like he's that much more stronger this time out, having won the Dunkirk 4 days race. That's a French race just in the north of France, of course, as he now begins to enter into the home straight here now. And a little bit of a word to his manager there as he squeezed the microphone on his PA system, as he now does a few last turns before he enters the Place de Verdun, and that'll be for him the end of today's stage of the Tour. A little look over his shoulder at 500 meters to go. They are too far behind. Last check was 18 seconds down the side streets, and he'll enter the square just ahead there. That's a good professional, nobody sneaking up on him. He can just check again if he likes, but this is going to be his victory now. Patrice Algol is sprinting for the first French win of this year's Tour de France. He read it well, and he deserves it, because he made the attack that shaped the final four-man escape on the last climb of the Côte d'Auja. He won all of the climbs today. He's gone second in the King of the Mountains. He doesn't matter about that. He is the winner of the stage in Pau, and the first Frenchman to do it. Now O'Grady could do his second place, but they're letting the youngest Frenchman get the lead here. Frank Pinot at 22 years of age. The French can't go wrong today. It's going to be a 1-2, Paul, as Frank Pinot now, the young man, he's looking over his shoulder. He doesn't believe it. He's annoyed because he isn't winning, but he can't believe he's finished second as the sprint comes on, and Dirksen's looks as though he's going to be beaten. Now, camera switched off to the right here, so you have to take my word on the sprint, but in fact I think Stuart O'Grady just pipped Ludo Dirksen on the line, and the fact the group was coming right up on O'Grady and Dirksen. Cassani on the right here now, Zabala breaks left, Vogenby gets his back wheel here, but watch out for Pedro Arillo. He was third in Avranches, and he's got a very good sprint, and he's coming up alongside the Kelme rider now. He's taking him on shoulder to shoulder. He is going to get the best of the rest as he hits the line, so Arillo will be very upset he missed the break today. And if you're wondering why Stuart O'Grady didn't respond to Algon's attack, well, here's his answer.
You ever ridden a road race? Legs are burning, everyone's the same, you know. The first one to attack is always going to take the edge off the other ones, and straight away, you know, you go into negative thinking, and I was trying to get the guys to really pull along, and that's racing, eh?
This is going to be a very, very tight sprint indeed. Men are moving all over the road here. On the left of our picture now, Brad McGee has swung off as Baden Cook starts to go for the line now. Zabel is coming too. Robbie McEwen is onto Zabel's wheel. This is going to be touch and go here, but I think Baden Cook, no. McEwen on the line, very, very close. He might well have got 2 places over Zabel, Paul, but there's no doubt about one thing. The Australian McEwen, for the first time, has got the green jersey for himself today.
So there's the result. Algol and Pinot made it a French 1-2, and seconds after the French TV director's attention span had run out, Stuart O'Grady took third place. Behind the break, Baden Cook actually won the bunch sprint ahead of Robbie McEwen, but the important thing was McEwen finished one place and therefore 1 point ahead of Eric Zabel. Behind them, all the big names finished in the main pack in the same time. Patrice Algol then with the first French win of the Tour, and you get pretty good odds on it being the last. So that result gives Stuart O'Grady his first appearance on page 1 of the overall standings, in at number 8 behind David Miller. Otherwise, no change among the big names as they look towards the Pyrenees, where there almost certainly will be. It was a good day for O'Grady, up into 3rd in the points competition too, but a better one for his Aussie rival Robbie McEwen, who now leads the green jersey race by a single point from Eric Zabel.
Robbie, you must be delighted with this again today.
Yeah, it's nice. This is what I've been working for the last few days, and you know, a few days ago, about 4 days ago, I was virtual green on the road, and then at the finish, I lost a few points through finishing 3rd when Eric won, and it took me another 4 days after that to get back on level terms. And now I knew I had to beat him here at the finish, and I was able to do that and take a 1 point lead. So it's an honour to be able to wear the green jersey in the Tour, and now we hit the mountains and the fun starts.
Today marked the start of the Tour Mark II as the race hit the Pyrenees in the certain knowledge that the Pyrenees would retaliate. Stage 11 would be the first big test for the men chasing Lance Armstrong's title, and of course for Armstrong himself. Now, of course, the strongest man in the mountains the past 3 years has been the strongest man overall, Lance Armstrong, and he didn't get that way just by eating his shredded wheat. While most riders are just getting out of winter training and into their first races of the year, Lance Armstrong is already riding the Tour, or at least what he considers to be the key stages of it. By the time the race starts for real, he'll have ridden climbs like today's maybe half a dozen times. And God help anything that gets in his way, whether it's an avalanche or the advice of his team manager.
Lance, we're going with the car to until where you can ride, to prepare your clothes and some tea and stuff. Okay. Okay?
What if I keep going?
You can't.
Huh?
You cannot. 3 meters of snow. The guy says you can. There's no way you can ride. There's no way.
Who says that?
It's, in my opinion, essential to know the courses, and not just to be able to say, yes, I know what the Ventoux looks like, or yes, I know what La Mongie or Plateau de Bay or La Plagne looks like, because I've done it before. We did it in the Tour in '93. I was there. I did it. It's not the same. The approaches are different. The roads have changed. You know, the climbs you do before are most likely not in the same order that you did them in '93. So it's important to go and see it exactly the way it is. And then second of all, and maybe even more importantly, is it's fantastic training. To spend 4 or 5 days there with such climbing and such hard days, in my opinion, is one way to improve.
No rider in history has prepared for the Tour with Armstrong's zeal and attention to detail, and the benefits can obviously be seen on the podium in Paris. But once you realise what he's doing, they're noticeable on the road too. When Armstrong attacks, like he attacked Jan Ullrich on Alpe d'Huez last year, it's in the knowledge of exactly where he is on the stage and what difficulties lie between him and the finish line. Not to diminish Armstrong's natural talent, but it's that kind of knowledge that can make the difference between winning and losing, and there's only one way to acquire it.
I think I want to ride a little more, you know? Why don't you do another 10 kilometers of uphill? I'll go down 10K and come back. Pay attention, huh? 10K. That's what it takes to win the Tour. What? Training in this weather. Nobody sees that.
We were about to see the results of it though, on a route that took the riders over the second most climbed mountain in Tour history, the Col d'Aubisque, and finished partway up the most climbed of the lot, the Tourmalet. Along the way, just 2 green jersey sprints for any sprinters who still had the legs to take them on. The first attack came early, 13 kilometres, and in the break was Laurent Jalabert, who quickly left the others behind to ride over the Col d'Aubisque on his own. It looked very reminiscent of a stage in the Pyrenees last year when Jalabert made an heroic break, only to be overhauled by Lance Armstrong on the way to Pla d'Adet. Of course, Lance is too businesslike to believe in omens, but nonetheless it was Postal doing all the work at the front of a medium-sized chasing group that also contained the yellow jersey and his other big rivals. Telecom were doing some chasing too, with Robbie McEwen struggling at the back. They were hoping to keep their man Eric Zabel at the front for just long enough to get some points at the second sprint of the day. Having gone up the Col de Bisque and the Col de Soulor, a couple of riders came down heavily. Jens Voigt of Credit Agricole and the winner of stage 7, Bradley McGee, who'd left a couple of sponsors' logos on the tarmac in exchange for some nasty looking road burn. As we join the action, Jalabert is still out front and hoping to avoid a rerun of last year's Pyrenean adventure.
They're now very much halfway through the town of Bagnères de Bigorre, and they all know what's on the horizon. Many of these riders have been through this town very many times in the past. Very often the Tour de France actually comes through this town the opposite way, because they climb the far side of the Col de la Tourmalet and then drop down this climb that they will face today. Armstrong still looking very calm and collected. He's got most of the teammates that he wants with him right now. It's great to see that Georgi Hincapie has been able to get over the big mountains, and I'm also pretty surprised by the performance of Pavel Padrunos in second position there, because he too has ridden an excellent race over the big mountain passes. He's a huge bike rider, the kind of bike rider normally associated in the past with Mario Cipollini. He used to be one of the lead-out men for Mario Cipollini on the Seiko team, and obviously Johan Brunel has done an awful lot of clever shopping around to strengthen up his team for the Tour de France.
Well, Jalabert riding hopefully to a stage win, if not the race lead, because that's gone, I think, for him. That wasn't his main intention of the day. It was, of course, to get a stage win, and also by virtue of the fact he's ahead and gets maximum points at the finish, he would also be pulling on the jersey as leader of the King of the Mountains. A beautiful sunny day, a lone leader in the Tour de France. The latest gap is 3 minutes and 19 seconds for the rider out front. Laurent Jalabert has held them without gaining or losing a second for so many kilometers now, and he still looks as though he's struggling, but let's hope that he will make it up that valley there to at least the finishing line, which today, thankfully, I would suggest now for Laurent Jalabert, is only 2/3 of the way up the Col de Tourmalet.
I'll tell you what, that was a beautiful backdrop, Phil, and one that I used to get very scared of when I was a bike rider, because when you saw the mountains starting to close around you, you knew there was only one way out, and that was up. And that's what all of these bike riders are thinking about right now. For Lance Armstrong, after the individual time trial a couple of days ago, this is his first real rendezvous at the Tour de France. He's laid his foundations for victory over the last 3 years in the mountains more than anywhere else, and it's nearly always been on the first day in the mountains. I think that tactic may change today, because I have a feeling Armstrong will wait for tomorrow's stage, which is a lot longer with a lot more repetition of climbing to do. But the one man who wants to stay as close to possible to him is there in the yellow jersey is Igor González de Galdeano. At the start of the day, they were separated by 26 seconds.
And it's nice to see Christophe Moreau, the King of the Mountains leader. He's currently lost that lead to Patrice Algol. Is in that group as well now. So too the unlucky Christophe Moreau, who crashed so many times in the opening few days, lost all hope of winning, but he's found his magic legs in the mountains and has done pretty well so far in that respect. So that big peloton now steadily getting bigger as we go down, and looking as though they're going to have a major showdown on the climb of the Col de Tourmalet. Best man will win, and if it's either Armstrong or Igor González de Galdeano, we will know soon who is going to take us through these mountains as the strongest. Well, we're looking at Laurent Jalabert, this wonderful cyclist from France who's ridden so well today. He's such a brilliant, aggressive bike rider. I'm not sure he can hang on to the finishing line. We all hope he can. Looking now, he's at 3 minutes 11 seconds. He is 20 kilometers or 12 miles from the finishing line. So close, and it's a desperate moment.
Well, the thing that goes against him is the fact that he was attacking from the very first kilometers of today's stage. He has led this race for about 120 kilometers so far. His advantage currently, as you can see there, 3 minutes and 15 seconds over the main field. But there are an awful lot of riders in this main field who will want to attack once the road starts to tilt upwards. All of the climbers. I'm sure we'll see men like Roberto Heras trying to come forward. Watch out for Santiago Botero as well. And of course, the press this morning all talking about the big Once 1-2, Igor González de Galdeano and Joseba Beloki.
I can't wait to see if they can apply that, because it would be great if they did. It's going to make a very, very exciting final climb today. And Slava Ekimov fuels up now for the slopes ahead.
Well, Ekimov, he's done an absolutely superb job throughout the day. You know, he's a man who's not very comfortable when it comes to the big mountain passes, but certainly he's done the job for the team right now. Sitting at the back of the group, he will try and go forward a little later on if he can and give the last bit of energy he's got in his body to try and help Armstrong get to the foot of this final climb of the day in an ideal position, probably starting in maybe the top 4 or 5 places.
3 minutes 15 seconds for Laurent Jalabert. Looking better, I think, now than he was about 15 miles ago.
His body will be absolutely aching right now. He's been pushing a huge gear over the flatlands. And just an idea to give you what kind of a backdrop these riders are looking at. These are the Haute Pyrénées, the high Pyrenean peaks. Some of these peaks in excess of 2,000 meters in altitude, but fortunately for the riders today, they only have to climb 1,700, which corresponds to 5,600 feet, and that's only at 2/3 of the way up the Col de Tourmalet. But what a climb it is. The last 4 or 5 kilometers of today's stage fill, the gradient really starts to kick in at around about 8 or 9%.
Well, this is the Valley of Campon, and the beautiful little town of Santa Maria de Campon has its place in the annals of the Tour de France. It was here in 1913 when Eugene Christophe came off the mountain, ready to climb up the next one, had broken his forks, and in the local forge he asked somebody to work the bellows while he repaired his own bicycle forks, and to get any assistance in those days was not allowed. He was disqualified from the Tour when he was the leader. And in fact, the forge is now part of a museum in that town.
That's an incredible story, but this is the area where the history and the legends of the Tour de France have always been made. The mountains are so dramatic. They're dramatic as a backdrop, and they're also dramatic as a racing terrain, as Laurent Jalabert knows so well. He's raced well in the Pyrenees in the past, and last year did a similar escapade to this through the Pyrenees and tried to get himself the win at the top of the summit of the Pla d'Ardèche. But unfortunately, he wasn't able to do anything against the return to the top of Lance Armstrong on that day.
And 20 kilometers to go for the US postal-led peloton containing the Maillot Jaune. And the stars of Kelme are here too, by the way, Botero and Sevilla. There's little Sevilla. Babyface himself, Christophe Moreau, nearest camera in the green. Behind him is Bobby Julich, who's looking good today, Bobby. But the one man I keep looking for and can't see, Paul, is David Miller.
I haven't seen anything at all of David Miller, and by the way, he did actually have to have x-rays over the rest day period to see what the pain was that was coming into his ribs. And in fact, he thought he might have broken a rib, but in fact he's got a slight rip on the intercostal muscles, and that hurts almost as much as breaking the rib. He's the leader in the white jersey competition, but looking at the size of this group, I feel sure that David Miller must be in the group, although we've never seen him or not even heard his name on race radio so far.
That's true, and they've given us a lot of names of this group, but they don't include David Miller's, and I thought they might have done because he's 7th overall, but it'll all come out in the wash, as they say, as we now look again. It's 17 kilometers to go now, just over 10 miles to the finish. Can Laurent Jalabert just hang on there and take out a great stage win? We certainly hope so. The sun is now coming off the right shoulder of this great French rider, Laurent Jalabert. The gap, 3 minutes 25 seconds. He's pushing it out again. This man never knows the words give up. He will fight to the end.
Well, he's around about 4 kilometers now from the real start of the final climb of the day. The final climb of the day is 12.8 kilometers. The average gradient only works out at 7%. But I think as we get closer to the summit is where it is its steepest part, and there the average gradient is 10%, and that's where it will really start to kick in and the pain will start to appear in the riders' minds.
Well, he has a terrific depth of pain threshold, Laurent Jalabert, and if he gets onto the climb, there's no knowing quite how he will stay there, but he'll fight. taking the fluids in, most important on today of all days, because it is very warm today in the Pyrenees. Thank heavens, it's a lovely day. Oh, look at this now, Jalabert keeping a relentless rhythm. This is the lovely town now as Santa Maria de Campon, where Eugene Christophe once snapped his forks and was then disqualified because he got somebody to work the bellows while he forged a new pair. That's not justice, but that was in 1913. The rules were different then.
Well, the rules were different then. These men have cars that follow behind to change their machines, and it's a much slicker organisation that the teams have than the early teams when riders used to sleep at the side of the road. And there's some great stories, if you ever want to read the history of the Tour de France, of men actually being kidnapped to try and stop them winning the Tour de France, and being set upon in the night as they tried to ride through the mountain passes. None of that goes on now, I don't think.
Well, not as far as we know. Now it's the spectators who sleep through the night on the mountain passes, I think, to wait for the arrival of the Tour, because when in the old days they come for 2 or 3 hours ahead of the race, now they come up to 48 hours ahead of the race. Huge crowd again in the Pyrenees. There's only one road away from the finishing line today, so everybody will have to be patient as they file down the Col de Tourmalet, back through Santa Maria de Campon, and then heading over to the Plateau de Bailly, which is where we'll finish tomorrow, and that is a tough climb. So Laurent Jalabert now has only one thing on his mind, that's the climb which is directly ahead of him. He is holding and slightly gaining, 3 minutes 20 seconds, so he just keeps it in that 5-second window. These boys keep the steady tempo going. Rubiera, number 9 there, the big rider from Spain, all now ready to ride alongside Lance Armstrong. Little rush of Rabobank riders there because Levi Leipheimer is here and looking good, so he may have informed the riders, put him in a good position as they start the assault on the finishing climb. Igor González de Galdeano and his teammate Joseba Beloki is down there side by side. Beloki's been off, he's on a different bike. In fact, he changed his bike in the end, and you can see he's got no number on his frame now. So he's got rid of all his problems, he hopes, for the day. His only problem now, where's number 1 in this race, Lance Armstrong. There's Beloki to the right. And as we look down at the other riders, Sastra's there too for CSC. Tyler Hamilton is in here. And we'd love to complete it for all of our viewers around the world and say indeed that David Miller is here, but we can't yet because we haven't spotted him.
Well, these guys are all starting to get very nervous right now. It's important to start this climb in the first 10 or 15 places. This man here who started the day in the polka dot jersey, well, I would think by the end of tonight it will go onto the shoulders of probably Patrice Algol, who went over the big climb of the day in 3rd position. But what a great tour he's had so far. He's worn the King of the Mountains jersey over the first flat days. A lot of team organisation starting to happen now. You can see different teams are trying to move their leaders further forward. Rabobank are looking after their man, Levi Leipheimer. Armstrong in the middle there, Phil, still looking calm and collected. That face of his gives no sign of emotion away at all.
Well, Santiago Botero, who beat him in the time trial, has moved up onto Armstrong's right shoulder now. Showdown on La Mongie soon. Now looking down there, Paul, can you see David Miller? And I'd love you to tell me you can, but I can't.
Well, I haven't spotted him yet, and I can't believe that he hasn't managed to get into this group. Richard Virenque is there on the left-hand side. And let's have a look a bit further down the main peloton if we can see a white jersey. The Cofidis rider just at the back there, one of David Miller's teammates. That looked like Massimiliano Lelli.
Yeah. I'm not sure he's in that group, but I don't know where he got dropped. His name was never given to us if he's not in that group. As we go back up to the leader now, Laurent Jalabert, his face, normally a poker face, it never gives anything away. Today is indicating he is now struggling a little bit, but he's holding all of the gap. He hasn't lost anything for kilometre after kilometre, but we must remember he hasn't gained anything either.
Well, he's about 2 kilometres from the start of the climb. Well, in fact, no, he's not. 13 kilometres indicated there. The summit of the climb, 13 kilometres away from Laurent Jalabert is now.
Well, we're looking here now at Jalabert once again. Jalabert is turning that huge gear and he's looking to me okay just now. He's still got all of his time in hand. This is working on the last 13 kilometers of the race, and it's going to be tough, but can he hang on? 4 stage wins in a sparkling career. No longer in the hunt for the yellow jersey. He's not far off recovering all of his time. He was 4 minutes and 18 seconds down at the start of the day. He gets a 20-second time bonus. He's got a couple of seconds of bonus out on the course today, but there's nobody thinking of him in yellow tonight. It simply won't happen, because once on the slopes there's going to be a major explosion in that peloton behind, and every man for himself.
Well, it's going to be pretty tough for Laurent Jalabert right now to succeed, because I'm certain there will be some huge attacks. I don't think Armstrong is going to attack on this first climb of the day. I think the attacks will come from some of the climbers like Roberto Heras initially for Euskaltel-Euskadi, the Basque team, because the top slopes of this climb are almost painted in orange, and the Basque flag is absolutely resplendent on the slopes of the Pyrenees this afternoon. But if Armstrong sees an opportunity present itself, then he will seize it with both hands and try and stamp his authority on the race.
Interesting to note that as we watch the long, thin file here of the US Postal boys, that still no one from ONCE has bothered to assist the US Postal in the pacemaking. That gap of 3 minutes 27, it just is so pegged. They are doing the same speed in the peloton as Jalabert is doing all by himself out front. And as they come relentlessly now towards the last climb of the day of La Mangie, it's interesting to note that the Spanish police are on duty today here in France alongside the gendarmes of France, and I suspect it's so they've got people who can speak the language, because the majority of the spectators, I think, are from Spain.
Huge number of Spanish spectators have come across the border here to see these mountain stages in the Pyrenees. Although we are in France, they very much regard it as their own stages, don't they? And we're not very far away from the Spanish border either. Jalabert now showing the pained position that he's got. He's out of the saddle, trying to keep that gear ticking over, but we're slowly but surely getting to the part where the gradient of this climb begins to kick in.
Marvellous crowd here. The crossroads in the Pyrenees here, once where Greg LeMond was in hot pursuit of Claudio Chiappucci. He came out from that little road on the left, in fact. You can't even see it at the moment. It's covered by people. Look at this enormous crowd now shouting Laurent Jalabert onto the climb of La Mangie, and it's now all or nothing for him today, because if he does get caught, they'll wash him away and he won't even get the lead in the King of the Mountains.
But if you get a chance to glimpse at all the orange t-shirts and the orange hats, those are the Basque supporters, and they're all shouting for Laurent Jalabert and encouraging him, because he spent the majority of his career riding for the Spanish ONCE team. It's only in the latter part of his career that he switched across to come here to CSC Tiscali. He now can only hope to survive, but he is a tough competitor. If it was anybody else right now, I would say, well, they're almost certainly going to get caught. But with Laurent Jalabert, there's no way that you can dismiss the possibility that this man could survive on the slopes of La Mangie. And the last man to win here was a Frenchman as well.
3 minutes 20 seconds is the gap as he starts the last 13 kilometers of the day. All uphill, right to the line. And he's going to be cheered all of the way now, because no cars have been allowed up this road all day. The police have been turning them off at the bottom, and the spectators have been walking up in their thousands, carrying all the ice boxes, their food. And tonight there's an awful lot of people got an awful long way to walk back down the mountain.
Well, those are all the main contenders of the Tour de France for this year. The green jersey in the middle there is the Crédit Agricole rider, Christophe Moreau. Santiago Botero, the Colombian, just off to the left-hand side. The yellow jersey is the leader at the start of today, Igor González de Galdeano, and just in front of him, the man he's keeping his eyes on is the man who wears number 1, Lance Armstrong. And one of Armstrong's teammates just pulling off there. He's done a sterling job for today, but he can do no more at all. And slowly but surely, the numbers in this group will be reduced until we only have the heads of state left at the front.
I think that was Peña, who has been on the front for mile after mile, as the first rider to drop off now. As there are plenty of teammates left, though, to help Lance start the run at the mountain. As we see now the yellow jersey making sure he's never far from the front. Neither is Joseba Beloki. This is now the mighty George Hincapie here. He's had a great day in the mountains, this man. He's now setting the pace at the front. The yellow jersey and Beloki all hooked up to the back wheel of Lance Armstrong. And this is going to be a most interesting climb. These riders will be very, very nervous now, very tense, wasting a lot of nervous energy as they start the final climb.
They're also all very nervous because they are all waiting for the attack to come from Lance Armstrong. In the past, the last 3 years, Phil, he's always launched a vicious attack on the very first mountain stage. Somehow, I don't think he's going to do it today.
Poor old Jens Voigt drop back here. He's hung on well, but he crashed on the descent of the Soulor. And he has now dropped off the back. He's going to have a cool cruise up the last 12 kilometres. So we're on the base of the climb now as George Hincapie is leading the riders to their final destiny today at the finish line in La Mongie.
This is a great ride by George Hincapie. He's a very strong bike rider. He never really has been very much at home on the big mountain passes, but he got himself over the Col de l'Aubisque today to look after his teammate and his friend Lance Armstrong. He will work as hard as he can, and this is what happens, Phil, when you've done the job for the day. Pavel Padrinos, all he has to do right now is just survive and try and get himself to the finish as best as he can.
Hincapie, relentless pacemaking. This man who's an excellent classic single-day rider comes to the Tour de France to help one man, his friend Lance Armstrong. Now he's riding at the front with all of the rhythm on a great day in the mountains for him, because he rode up near the front of the peloton on the giant Col d'Aubisque when we came over the top of that at 5,600 feet. Sad to see this fall, as we now see Brad McGee injured in a fall today when he was moving up towards Laurent Jalabert, now being tailed off on the climb. He'll live to fight another day though, and we certainly hope that he takes care on the way down next time. The Once rider also in trouble there is Michael Pradera, done his teamwork. He's also dropping off. That's what happens now as the riders will start to drop off now. There's words here from Peña, I think it is, as this is Rubiera, it was, talking now to Johan Brunel in Spanish, no doubt, because Brunel speaks Spanish, and just asking for what the situation is, perhaps the whereabouts of Jalabert at 10 kilometres to go. Well, I can tell you, 3 minutes 15 seconds, just 10 kilometres to go. This is an heroic performance today.
Well, he hasn't lost anything at all, and this is really very impressive, because bear in mind, this man, Phil, was attacking after just 15 kilometres of racing today. As soon as the race came out of the blocks, Jalabert was looking for the move. He's equipped his bike with very special wheels today. They're aerodynamic wheels. These wheels were put on for a special reason. The reason was he wanted to get himself off the front and try and do a special exploit in the Pyrenees for what is possibly his last attempt at the Tour de France, because he's told the world that he will retire at the end of this year, and he's doing a great ride and still holding on. I'm sure the accelerations must come, but they won't come, I don't think, until we get to the steeper part of the climb.
Right, because at the moment you may have noticed Jalabert still had his chain on the big chain wheel, pedaling a heavy gear indeed, and not the sort of gear that he will pedal very, very shortly. Here is Zabel. Inspired ride today. He's dropping off the back now with Aldag, joined Bab Magri, Christophe Moreau, Patrice Algol. They're all off the back now as it gets really, really tough. And Laszlo Bodrogi was the other Mappe rider there, who was part of the original escape earlier on. They've all called it quits on the climb now. They've stepped aside as the big players have started to turn the screw that little bit tighter, and it's the boys of US Postal who are mounting the pace. Still over 3 minutes for Jalabert, 3 minutes 10 seconds. He can tick the kilometres off now. He's in single digits. Unfortunately, the last 6 kilometres are at 1 in 10 or 10%.
That's painful, that is hard. Laurent Jalabert has got to do something very special to survive today, Phil, because he's been on the attack for over 130 kilometres.
The shoulder's just rocking a little bit, and this is Laurent Brochard here. Well, I never saw him come back into the race. He was dropped on the Aubisque. He must have done, but now I think he's going back again from the leading group. So he did a fair ride to get back into a position to even be left behind by the peloton today. Looking down at the selection being made here now, a lot of riders have dropped away off the tail of this group, including, unfortunately, Bradley McGee. He wouldn't have been dropped if he hadn't have been injured on the descent of the fall of the descent after a fall on the Col de Soulor. And another rider going off the back here, looks as though it's Michael Bogarts. So he's gone, and this is David Miller, so he was in there, but sadly the first time we see him he is losing contact from the bunch.
Well, he's having a hard time. It must be difficult to keep hold of the handlebars with that rib that's giving him a lot of pain, a problem with his intercostal muscles, and when you get into a big race like the Tour de France, no extra pain is required at all, and it's a pity to see that David Miller is going off the back there. He had said to us before the start of the Tour de France that he had lost a bit of his time trialing ability, Phil, because he'd specially trained for the big mountain stages. On the first day of the mountains, he's losing contact with the Lance Armstrong group.
Yes, and not a big group, not just a selection of a handful of riders, which doesn't all well perhaps, but we'll see and hope. As we now see Jalabert continuing, he's still holding a 3-minute advantage. The bunch had just gone under that 10-kilometre banner, 6 miles, as he is still about 1.5 kilometres, probably a full mile ahead on the road. The Spanish supporters here to cheer on their men, still saving something for this wonderful Frenchman. He's suffering now like he's probably, well, I won't say like he's never suffered before, because he always tries to the top of his ability.
He knows what it's like to suffer. He's been through this so many times in a 14-year career, turning professional back in 1989. 4 stage victories in the Tour de France. Most of those have been on the flat days. 2 times he's won himself the stage on the 14th of July, Bastille Day, but this would be a great victory for him if he can hold them off today. I don't think US Postal Service, Phil, are actually trying to pull him back. They're just setting a nice steady tempo on the front. Armstrong, I feel his tactics are he's waiting to see what the others are going to do on this first day in the mountains.
I couldn't agree more, and Armstrong's team have been the team of the day. They've controlled this race from the start. They've kept the race leader on the defensive, looking for a way out of the box in which they've placed him. And while up here, this man isn't going to be the race leader by the end of the day, but with a small time gap, let's hope he can hang on to take the honours, because he's certainly been the man who deserves them today. Laurent Jalabert was the highest placed Frenchman. I think he still is the highest placed Frenchman overall. Starting the day 4 minutes and 18 seconds down. If he can finish 1.5 minutes ahead, he'd be in the top 5 riders in the Tour anyway.
Well, the French have a good word to describe this kind of bike rider, the man we've been looking at for most of the afternoon, Laurent Jalabert. They call him a guerrier, which means a warrior, and he certainly is a warrior of the Tour de France, because he's gone out on the attack on so many occasions. We're now looking at Lance's men. That was Rubiera just going through. Armstrong still looking calm and collected. Roberto Heras is just behind him. Heras, a former winner of the Tour of Spain. He actually has had a serious problem with his calf over the last few days. The man who wears the yellow jersey must be wondering exactly what is going to happen. Levi Leipheimer, 3rd overall in the Tour of Spain last year, the leader of the Rabobank squad right now, and formerly he used to ride alongside the men in blue because he raced for US Postal last year.
There was no place for him in the team this year, because he has become a leader in his own right after that brilliant ride in the Tour of Spain last year. Now it's his first time in the Tour de France, and this a big test day for him. Back to the man who just wants to survive and get it over with. He's an old hand in the Tour de France. He's had the coloured jerseys, every one of them on his shoulders at some time or another. And the 2 he's kept all the way to Paris, the King of the Mountains and the green jersey as best sprinter. There aren't many cyclists in the world ever won the 2 extremes of the competitions.
Definitely not, but this man has done that, and he's also won himself the Tour of Spain as well, and he's won so many stages in that unbelievable bike race, and he's been able to win himself different kinds of races from the very start of the season in February right the way through till the end of the year.
George Hincapie doing a superb job today as he keeps the pace up at the front, being followed here by Rubiera. And then Heras, the little climbers now, look how lithe they are there. They just seem to dance on the pedals when they get out of the saddle. They've got no excess body weight whatsoever. As we now see other riders moving up, and one we should watch out for, Paul. He crashed out last year when he broke his collarbone, is Ivan Basso.
Well, he's in the white jersey there for Faso Bortolo, just on the right-hand side. This is happening at the rear. There is Yaroslav Ekimov. He's done his job for the day. He's slipping away from the main contenders, as is Emmanuel Magnan. And it's surprising to see him so close to the front of a stage, a mountain stage of the Tour de France. But he was one of the men who went out on the early attack with Laurent Jalabert when they formed a group of 11 men that went off the front. and after that he survived and managed to stay in contact with the leading group. But right now we are looking down at this group, which is slowly but surely reducing itself in numbers. And here's the first attack of the day, the first attack from the yellow jersey group.
Yes, and it wouldn't surprise me. It is in fact, it's not Agnolito, it's one of his teammates though, from Jean de la Tour, who's launched the attack. And this could be an interesting move. It could well be Laurent Lefebvre who's gone clear here. As they start the moves now, they won't react to him. Lefebvre is on his way.
You can see how US Postal have certainly not responded at all to that attack coming out of the front. They're not worried about these lesser riders moving off the front. They are waiting to see if the attacks will come from Santiago Botero or Óscar Sevilla or even Roberto Heras. I don't think, in fact, Armstrong wants to set a hard tempo to, in fact, pull back the Frenchman Laurent Jalabert. He will be looking at the men who stand a serious chance of beating him in the overall classification. Laurent Lefebvre off the front there for Jean de la Tour. But you can see there's no panic at all in the main group. They're not worried, and Georgi Hincapie swings off there. The job's being done. It's a question now of just trying to get his huge carcass up to the summit.
Well, he'll hang on well. David Etcheberry has just been dropped from the peloton after his attacks earlier on today. He was second over the Col d'Aubisque. Laurent Lefebvre will keep the job in hand, try and get away from them. They won't directly chase him down. He's not a future winner of the Tour de France this year. But Armstrong sent up Rubiera now to lift the pace. And there he is down there. It's beginning to get a little select group at the head of the bunch. Also down there too is Andrei Kivilev as Rubiera is setting the pace. This is back to the front now as we see Laurent Jalabert look over his shoulder, trying to stay away, still looking very good. That face doesn't often give the game away. I thought he was telling us earlier he was finished, but now he's okay. This is David Etcheberry. He's been dropped and he's trying to pick his way through groups. And George Hincapie going off on the right. I think caught a glimpse there too, sadly. Bobby Julich going off the back. There he is, Julich just in front.
Well, Julich was hoping to ride well in this year's Tour de France, and once again in the mountains having a hard time following the tempo set on the front by his former teammates. Michael Bogard going out of the back for the second time and probably the last time. Dario Frigo as well going off the back right now.
Ouch.
This is when it's really starting to get grippy. You see here one or two Once riders coming off the back as well. Jörg Jaks, he's done a lot of work for the team earlier on. He's been off the back looking after his teammate Joseba Beloki. Now this is a bit of a surprise. This is Menchoff, the leader of iBernesto.com.
He's also cracked as we speak now, as we're going past with our camera to get up to the head of the race. It has been a destructive few minutes here. Adi Engels is going. Well, that would be expected here, but watch out for this man, Gutierrez. Another one gone, and they continue to lift the pace at the front. Andrei Kivilev, fourth last year, is still in this. I see Laurent Lefebvre has been picked up. He's on the right of our picture. This, what have we got? Maybe 15, 20 very select riders now. And Levi Leipheimer is still there on the left of our picture with the balding pate. 2:25 is the gap now to Laurent Jalabert. I feel inclined to cheer for Jalabert right now because we'd love him to win.
He deserves to win after attacking from the very start. In fact, he's only 5.9 kilometers from the finish. The tempo on the front there is being done by Lance Armstrong's faithful lieutenant there, Chechu Rubiera. Rubiera setting a very nice pace on the front. No problem at all for Armstrong. He doesn't seem to be worried about pulling back Laurent Jalabert. Joseba Beloki is on his tail. The yellow jersey still in very fine contact in fourth place. Igor González de Galdeano. They are all there for the moment. All of the big names are there, but it seems as if Christophe Moreau is going to the back. The green jersey of Crédit Agricole in a bit of serious difficulty.
Well, pace making being done by Postal. Spanish riders here are stretching this group to an awful long line now. Looking down at the group there, the yellow jersey still marking his man, and Beloki on his shoulder. As we see now the two Spanish riders lining up behind Lance Armstrong. It looks now like the end of Francis Moreau here. He's also been dropped by the group. And also going off is Zabeldia of Euskaltel Euskadi. We'll get back up to the leaders very shortly, but they are thinning out rather rapidly just at the moment. David Miller sadly has gone as well. He was in the group, he's been dropped, and if Ivan Basso, still in the group, gets more than 2 minutes, he'll be the next candidate for the leaders' white jersey.
Well, going out of the back, this is Jose Javier Gomez from Kelme. Also going out of the back was the Russian leader of AG2R, Bocharov. So some big names going out of the back. That's a very prized souvenir. Armstrong taking off his hat and throwing it into the crowd. Now, that'll be worth a few bob in a couple of years' time.
Well, we're now hearing that Tyler Hamilton has cracked as well and is being left. We might get a shot of that. Also, Richard Veronk is in trouble. So the pace that's being set by the US Postal Domestics here from Spain is crippling the rest of the race. But it's noted, Paul, that the 2 riders from Spain who said they're going to give trouble to Armstrong are still riding right at the front.
They're still there and they're still waiting for an opportunity. Roberto Leipheimer did not look very comfortable either just a few moments ago. He would be the big hope for the crowd here, who are resplendent in their orange jerseys and shirts, and they were hoping that it was going to be the day for Euskaltel Euskadi. You can see the Basque flag at the side of the road there, but I think the majority of the crowd here are willing this man on to win, because this man has done an unbelievable exploit today.
Well, there's a puncture and it sounds like Botero has got a problem in this group. We might see him, but I believe he is stopped by the roadside. We're looking for him as we see Moreau here fight his way back up to the tail of this group. We will look for him on the right, I think, as we go through. There's the car stopped. Now he must be under shadow of the car, I think. But it's certainly trouble for Botero, Paul, as we now see this rider press on relentless. Another kilometre ticked off as the Spanish people here cheering on a Frenchman.
Well, that's a tough move there for Botero to try and pull himself back into the race. Richard Virenque also in difficulty right now. If we look down there, you can see there in the group is Sevilla. We're looking further back, and there's the yellow jersey. The yellow jersey has cracked, and he is slipping away from the lead. Look at the face on Sevilla. They need to stay in this group. Armstrong talking to his troops there, Phil. He's egging them on, he's encouraging them, he's telling them exactly what tempo to set.
Well, wait for it. In the next 3 minutes, Lance Armstrong will be in the maillot jaune of the Tour de France. Igor González de Galdeano started the day 26 seconds ahead, and he's losing it fast with, surprisingly, Francisco Mancebo is in that group as well. Manolo Sainz always said his man was on the left there, Beloki, and Beloki is still riding. But they're slowly becoming outnumbered. A great ride being done as well by Andrei Kivilev of Kazakhstan. Still in there.
He's still in there, still surviving. Mancebo is here. The yellow jersey has to survive. Now it's Roberto Heras. Heras has come to the front. This man is the big mate of Lance Armstrong. His teammates have done an unbelievable job at 5 kilometers to go. Leipheimer is no longer there. They're 5 kilometers to go to the summit. Andrei Kivilev looks as if he's going to crack now, the communist rider on the left-hand side. Roberto Heras is lifting up the pace for Armstrong, who slowly but surely is riding his way towards the yellow jersey.
And this is destruction time now. Only one rider is left. One rider on Once versus what's left of US Postal. This is a show of defiance now. Beloki is hanging on to the coattails of Armstrong as Roberto Heras is just lifting the pace too much for everyone except 2 men. So it's 1-on-1, Paul, and Beloki is the only man able to hang on to Armstrong.
Well, it looks like the Once Armada is crumbling. There is Levi Leipheimer, the leader of the Rabobank team. He can see the yellow jersey, Igor González de Galdeano. González de Galdeano knows that his chances are slipping away this afternoon, and Manolo Sainz was right to assume that Joseba Beloki should be the lone leader. Just for the record book, this man at 5 kilometers to go had a 1 minute and 20 seconds advantage over this chasing group of Armstrong, Heras and Joseba Beloki. Armstrong, though, has got an unbelievable team of climbers. What a brilliant job done by Chechu Rubiera, and then taken over by Roberto Heras. He's got a huge bandage on his right calf muscle there, but he's riding a great tempo for Lance today. They are now just 56 seconds down on Laurent Jalabert, and even Beloki looks to be having some difficulty to stay on the tail wheel there of Armstrong.
The first day in the mountains, and Armstrong is all over this race again. Less than a minute now to catching Laurent Jalabert. I don't think he can survive, but at least the 3 coming up are not going to wipe him out of the leaderboard entirely. He surely can hang on to something on this great day of racing. Armstrong checking in there with Brunel too. I think he probably wants to know where's the yellow jersey right now, as Heras does all of the work for his teammate, allowing Armstrong the option here to sprint clear when he wants to. He is riding this event so cool.
He is very cool, talking to Johan Brunel all the time. Brunel talking to his man, slowly but surely explaining just exactly what the gap is. Right now, all Igor González de Galdeano can do is ride his personal time trial to the finish and hope that he conserve 26 seconds. I don't think he will right now. Laurent Jalabert is hoping that he can conserve the remainder of his advantage, which is down to 38 seconds. It's such a pity for this man. He's put in a brilliant battle today, and he's going to go through exactly the same scenario as he went through on the Plata Day last year. He's going to see Lance Armstrong coming forward, this time not alone, but this time he will be with Roberto Heras and Joseba Beloki. They're pulling all of the cars out of the gap right now, because on his tail is Lance Armstrong.
They are there. They can see this man at 4 kilometers. Armstrong, Beloki looks as though he's under pressure, but he's hanging on. Heras takes a good look at the man from his own country here as he pulls an American to the lead in the Tour de France. Inside 4 kilometers now, and the gap is 26 seconds. This man looks here as though he's just gone through the shower as the perspiration tumbles off his face. Igor González de Galdeano with the other American, Levi Leipheimer, right behind him. They're going to be still high on the overall classification, but they are going to be scared so much of what will come tomorrow from this man, Lance Armstrong.
I've never seen a man chat so much with his team manager at a situation like this. At the moment, he's calm and collected. He's just riding a very sensible race. He's using his teammate. And this year, Roberto Heras is going to be absolutely superb. Last year, he had a hard time coming through the mountains. He was plagued by a tendonitis. But this year, we are looking at a very good and strong Roberto Heras. He is going to be a huge ally for Lance Armstrong in the mountains. Jalabert looks over his shoulders. He knows what is happening right now, and he has taken a serious blow to his morale. He thought for a few moments, I think, he was going to win this stage. He's got himself a lot of points in the King of the Mountains competition, but he was hoping to win the first Pyrenean stage of this year's Tour de France.
Well, as they approach him, the yellow jersey is now a full minute behind Lance Armstrong, Beloki and Heras. And so Beloki, who started a minute 23 behind his teammate, is now climbing into second place in the Tour de France. Armstrong undoubtedly clear for yellow.
When you crack on a climb like this, you blow to absolute smithereens, and that's exactly what's happened to Igor González de Galdeano. He has worn the yellow jersey now, Phil, since the team time trial. The pressure of wearing the yellow jersey on your shoulders is unbelievable. The press want to talk to you every day. You can't sleep at night, and right now it has been taken away from his shoulders. They have now caught Laurent Jalabert. There are 4 riders at the front of the race. I wonder if Laurent Jalabert has got enough left in his body just to try and stay with Armstrong. Heras is setting the tempo there. There's a Lone Star flag at the side of the road, and Armstrong quite content, Phil, just to sit there and let Heras do the pacemaking.
There is nothing to gain at the moment for Beloki even attempting to attack Armstrong, even if he can. Levi Leipheimer being tailed by the Maillot Jaune group here, which is still gathering strength as riders join Igor González de Galdeano, but now timed at 1 minute 10 seconds. Iva Kivilev is the rider on the left of our picture there, and rider number 31 is Óscar Sevilla, but Botero has not recovered from that problem he had down the road. Most unfortunate for the Colombian. And Jalabert has also cracked. Let's hope he can hang on for 4th place.
Look at his face. That really tells a picture. He thought for a few moments he could hang on to the train of Armstrong, Heras and Sevilla. He couldn't do that, but this man was attacking from the very first kilometers of today's stage. Roberto Heras on the front is doing the superb job for Lance Armstrong, pacing him up this climb. Armstrong has built himself a magnificent team for the Tour de France. His team, when they first came to the Tour, were criticised for not being strong. Right now, I think they've got the advantage over Once, who thought they were the strongest team on block, to take on the Texan.
Well, it has been a demonstration beyond belief here. We've always thought Armstrong was riding a calculated tour. Now he's proved it. he's still riding a calculated tour. He's riding under instructions from his manager, not wasting his energy. He doesn't need to apply any more pressure. He may never go to the front today except to win the stage, because he's let his team gain all the time for him. And now this man Heras has been worth his weight in gold. They're saying that the Group Maillot Jaune, well, it's coming back. It was 1:10, it's now 49 seconds, so it may be clawing its way back. Armstrong is conserving energy here as best he can for the big day tomorrow.
Well, another time check coming in off race radio, 57 seconds. I think I'm more inclined to believe the 57 seconds, because this man is going backwards. There's no way, looking at him, he is coming forwards to the group of Armstrong. Armstrong's group looks strong. Look at the face. This man thought he could hold on to Armstrong maybe for one more day, but he's having to relinquish leadership of his team to Joseba Beloki, who is just managing to survive here with Lance Armstrong and Roberto Heras. But even Beloki seems to be having a hard time staying on the wheel of the man setting an unbelievable pace on the front, Roberto Heras, wearing number 3.
2-1 the odds now. 2 US Postals against the Once rider. He's hopelessly outnumbered here. Armstrong hasn't used any of his energy yet in making the pace up this climb. It would not surprise me though if Beloki tries one cheeky attack just to try and steal the stage for a psychological result, but somehow I can't see Lance allowing it.
I don't think I want to get Lance very angry at this stage of the game, and I think if we were to launch an attack, we would see a huge, violent counter-attack coming for Armstrong. For the moment, he is quite content to ride along in the slipstream of his teammate. He may well even try and offer the victory to his teammate at the end of the day, but the most important thing for these guys is for the victory to be in the US Postal camp. Beloki is sitting there, and he has not got any ability at all to attack. He's quite happy to be there. The American flags are mixing it in with the Basque flags at the side of the road, and it looks as if Beloki is having a hard time for actually staying on the wheel of the 2 men from the US Postal Service team.
Go Lance on the torso of that man that just ran past. It's pick your hero and choose here, because the Americans being knocked out by the supporters of Beloki as they run alongside him. So it's Spain and America as we race across French roads, and this is a tremendous atmosphere here in the Tour de France. And this poor man Laurent Jalabert steadily going back. He's 10 seconds back as we speak, but still riding this mountain in 4th place.
Well, this is what happens when the lights go out. Poor old Laurent Jalabert, he was riding on morale before. He still felt that he had the possibility of a win, and once you realize that you are no longer going to win, all the lights and sound goes out completely. This is the group of the second heads of state of the Tour de France this year. Raimundas Rumsas is in the blue and pink for Lampre. On the front there, the yellow jersey, Igor González de Galdeano. In there as well is Jose Acevedo for Once. It's the team of the men who are going to be the second place runners, I think, in this year's Tour de France, because US Postal Service may well be climbing well up in the overall standings, and Roberto Heras is doing himself a pretty nice job as well today.
64 seconds the gap now. It'll be 1.5 before we get to the summit, I'm sure of that, as this rider, Roberto Heras, is just storming up this mountain for Armstrong, who still doesn't look as though he's made any effort whatsoever. Underneath the canopies now as we approach the village of La Mongie. These canopies to stop the rock slides and the snow in the winter, to keep them off the road, as these riders now go through a corridor of orange shirts of the people from the Basque area of Spain, all shouting for the man in pink, while it's the man in blue who is the coolest operator on the Tour this day.
Well, right now they're into the barriers. This is the safest part of the course. Right now, a few moments ago, it was just a corridor of people and noise for Armstrong, Heras and Joseba Beloki. This is Laurent Jalabert. By the way, he's around about 51 seconds behind. Ivan Basso, in fact, counter-attacked the yellow jersey group a few moments ago, and he has caught Jalabert. He is in 4th place on the road.
Well, this is the next white jersey after David Miller, I think, in the Tour. This is another superb performance, but it's all being acted behind the real centre stage. Here it is. That I suppose you noticed then that was a terrific acceleration that came from Heras. I thought he cracked Beloki, but Beloki has come back on. Armstrong, well, not under pressure, he's still waiting. He's waiting to see the banner, I think, for the finish, and then I expect him to shoot away. Now, where does Laurent Jalabert find these legs from? He's hung on to Basso, and he's hanging on to 5th place on the stage. This is the group behind of the Maillot Jaune. He's lost the lead now, as we head up with the leaders inside 1 kilometre to go as we come up towards that kite. 68 seconds to the maillot jaune. Now, Paul, where does Lance launch the finishing attack?
Well, I think he's going to wait until the very last moment. He said he didn't want to do anything dramatic today. He just wanted to see how everybody else reacted. The attacks never came from the climbers on the first day in the mountains. Men like Roberto Heras were in serious difficulty. The most unfortunate man there really is Santiago Botero, who had a crash. He had a puncture at the side of the road there, but right now the answer is I think Armstrong will wait until the last 400 or 500 meters. González de Galdeano in serious difficulty now. He can't stay with the other contenders, and Acevedo staying alongside him, trying to keep him in a top 5 position.
7 days in yellow. It's all but a dream now for Igor González de Galdeano, as we see the only man likely to challenge Armstrong now, Joseba Beloki, hanging on. It's sad when you see the maillot jaune in trouble, but he's had a good run for his money. He was always seen as the man who one day would lose that yellow jersey. As we see now, Jalabert being swept up by this rather large group of riders. Jalabert has gone to the limit today, and I don't think there's anything more left in the tank. Back to Roberto Heras, still dragging his captain to the summit, and Beloki still hanging on to the express.
Well, this has been an unbelievable piece of teamwork by Roberto Heras in first position there right now, and Armstrong so far has not had to make an effort himself at all. He has a brilliant team here at the Tour de France. All 9 riders are still there and intact. He now is counting on one of the best climbers in the world, Roberto Heras, a winner of the Vuelta a España. He now is just pacing Armstrong up to the finish. Armstrong looks across the road to force Beloki to come to the front. They want to make sure they don't get caught out by a last-minute attack by the Spaniard.
Sorry a little bit about the pictures there, but we're back to normal now. Armstrong is just manoeuvring Beloki into number 2 position to ride him out of the race in the race for first place. He has watched Beloki all day long. He's moved over, made him go second, and poising himself for the sprint. Look at this now. He's got him pinned up behind Heras, and he's waiting till he sees the moment to attack, and he's going to win by 2 seconds.
He's going to wait and see if Beloki attacks first. For there is the time to the maillot jaune. The yellow jersey at the start of the day is 1 minute and 23 seconds behind right now.
Exactly what Beloki was behind the maillot jaune this morning, 1 minute and 23. So Beloki climbs to second overall in the Tour de France, but he is still going to be 1 minute 23 behind the new leader, I would think. Sorry, a few seconds behind the new leader, Lance Armstrong. Now, inside of the line, Beloki's still thinking of a win here. He's still proud enough to say, look, this is a finish in front of Spanish people, and he's going to give it his best shot. Heras, I think Armstrong would have given this stage to Heras if only the other man wasn't there.
He would love to give this victory to Roberto Heras, but that's not the scenario. Obviously, Joseba Beloki didn't read the script at the start of the day, and this is the move by Armstrong. He's going for the win.
Well, he's dug deep. He looks over his shoulder. There's really not a strong enough reaction from Beloki. Beloki is desperate here, but what a good fight he has put up. But now it's everything he's got unleashed in those legs, and this is now his 13th stage win in a Tour de France, more than any other current cyclist on the circuit. Armstrong wins the day, claims again another first on the first day in the mountains, and waiting for him the Golden Fleece. He's the new leader of the Tour.
But it was hard. Look how hard it was for Beloki over the last 50 metres. He is cracked, I think, more psychologically than anything else. This man waited till the last possible moment. His teammate Roberto Heras will have crossed the line in 3rd position, but the yellow jersey today has completely and utterly crumbled at the side of the road.
As we look here at the power of Lance Armstrong, the only time I think he seriously turned a pedal in anger was in the last 100 metres today. His team won the stage for him. Lance just finished it off in the best possible tradition.
Well, a finish that was supposed to be easy has certainly caused some serious time differences, and Armstrong didn't really race as hard as he could have done, I think. This is Andrei Kivilev, and the yellow jersey is in the finishing straight right now with Laurent Jalabert, Jose Acevedo and Igor González de Galdeano.
Last year's 4th place finisher, over 1.5 minutes behind on the climb. A great cheer for Jalabert as he comes in at 1 minute 47, and the yellow jersey has conceded virtually 2 minutes as he crosses the line today.
And as you can see from the caption, Lance Armstrong took 7 seconds off Joseba Beloki in the space of about 40 metres at the finish line. He was second, ahead of Roberto Heras, who did all the pacemaking. Ivan Basso, the young Italian rider, climbed impressively to finish 7th, with Igor González de Galdeano 11th, losing 1 minute 54 and the yellow jersey. And that was just the start of it. Behind Armstrong, the race was strung out all over the mountain. So let's run through the late arrivals. Unluckiest man of the day had to be Santiago Botero, who punctured just 3 kilometres from the finish and came in 2:24 down, although he was honest enough to admit he couldn't have stood the pace anyway. Another 5 minutes back was David Miller. He'd stayed with Armstrong's group until the final climb, when the tempo got too much, and even Basso's ride means that he loses the white jersey of Best Young Rider. Down around the 10-minute mark was Bradley McGee. It wasn't the climb that got to him, it was the descent.
Oh, just stupidity. I just lost concentration. I looked around, I heard a noise from one of the motorbikes behind, and before I looked back, we were already halfway through a bend and no chance. And that being stuck on the barbed wire fence like a wounded kangaroo.
But there's always someone worse off than yourself. And in this case, it was Robbie McEwen. Zabel had taken the green jersey from him at that hotspot sprint out on the road, but Robbie wasn't even around to see it. 10 minutes after Zabel had left the podium and headed for the team hotel, McEwen was rolling home in a slow-motion parody of his first week sprint finishes. The clock stopped at 27:21 behind, and Robbie stopped a couple of seconds after. So let's see how all that pain and suffering translates into placings. Armstrong is back on top for the first time since the prologue in Luxembourg. Beloki, the only man who could stay with him today, is second, 1 minute and 12 back. And González de Galdeano slips to third, ahead of Santiago Botero, who might have been third himself if it hadn't been for that puncture. David Miller started the day 7th and finished at 27th, 9.5 minutes back. Well, we might have seen it coming, but it was no less impressive for that. Lance Armstrong launching a decisive attack on the first big day in the mountains for the 4th year running, and taking his 13th stage win in the Tour, and incidentally the yellow jersey.
We talked about trying to win the stage and possibly taking the jersey, but it was never a moment where we said, okay, let's go. I mean, the team just started pulling at the bottom of the Obisque, and everybody was great today, and Floyd had a little bit of a problem, but the team was super. The race is still open, and this is the Tour, so if you have a bad day, you lose, anywhere from 2 to 20 minutes in one stage. So you have to stay on top of it, and it's still open.
And just to round off the first day in the mountains, Lance is also up to third in the King of the Mountains competition. Patrice Algol leads it, by the way, and if you're wondering how, it's because Algol built up most of his points over small climbs in the first week. Having laid waste to the field on the way up, Lance was enjoying the view on the way down after day 1 in the Pyrenees. Day 2, though, was twice as tough. There was a free helicopter ride on offer to anyone brave enough to take it on. Good evening. The Tour's first Pyrenean stage may have looked hard, but only until you turn the page of the official race guide and clock today's stage. 5 vicious climbs spread over 195 kilometres and finishing with the worst of the lot, up here to Plateau de Bay at an altitude of almost 1,800 metres. Before the gradient kicked in, though, there was some early sprint action, and Robbie McEwen took it ahead of Eric Zabel to cut the German's lead in the green jersey competition to just 1 point. For the second day running, Laurent Jalabert chanced his leg and was first over the second climb of the day. Behind him, the peloton paid rolling tribute at the memorial to Fabio Casartelli, the young Italian rider who died in a crash there in 1995. The mood of respect didn't last long, though, as Christophe Moreau and Carlos Sass got involved in a Franco-Spanish debate about the European single currency.
Looking at the peloton, being led as always by US Postal, but the gap is still more than 5 minutes as we speak, and Jalabert still up front.
Well, Lance Armstrong said just a few days ago that he thought this was the best team he's ever brought to the Tour de France, and it certainly is, because they still are a full complement of 9 riders. Each team at the Tour de France made up with 9 men, and each team structure is completely different depending on what the team's role is and what the team's objectives are. The objectives of this team are just one thing, That is to make sure that they can escort Lance Armstrong around the Tour de France safely, keeping him at the front end of the main field on the first 10 days as they did, absolutely superbly, keeping him all of the time out of danger, avoiding nearly all of the crashes. Although on the road to Avranches he had that strange little crash where somebody fell onto the back wheel of his teammate Roberto Heras. Heras's handlebars got caught into Lance Armstrong's back wheel. He had to stop at the side of the road. That day almost changed the outcome of the Tour de France, because in fact if it hadn't been for that crash there, Lance Armstrong would have been in the yellow jersey from the individual time trial. And yet now, Phil, he's telling us that he was a little bit surprised to take the yellow jersey yesterday.
Absolutely. He said he had an average day. Gosh, wish I could have an average day like that in the Tour de France, and as do many of these riders who are riding it. We're looking back now to the three leaders, not too far to the summit of the Col de Porte. And that's Nozal. I think he was acknowledging the support on the roadside there. He might have been calling for his team car, as we see a lot of work still being done by Jalabert on the front. And Jalabert is such a remarkable bike rider. You've got to take your hat off to this wonderful cyclist. We first came to know him in Britain when he took part in what was the Kellogg's Tour of Britain in those days. He was a very young cyclist then, and he got the race lead in the yellow jersey in Birmingham, I think it was. And I went up to speak to him because I'd never heard of him in my life. And he said, oh, I'll have won 3 races this year, but he was a first-year professional. And now, of course, we all know about Laurent Jalabert. Tour of Spain winner, Pyrenees winner, world time trial champion. He has done just about everything, and he won the King of the Mountains in the Tour de France last year. He always wanted to win the Tour de France, and for a while people thought he had the ability to win the Tour de France, but there was always somebody better than him, so he never has won the Tour de France, and I don't think he will now. Certainly not this year. One man called Lance Armstrong seems to be spoiling it for just about everybody, because he seems to just have the secret that the others don't have. He's now won it for 3 years, and nobody betting against him to stop him winning it this time around. Back to the chase here. Latest time gap, still a question mark, but I think it's just on 5 minutes. But they're saying 4:41 just now. There's a view of the Plateau de Bailly. That's where we're commentating from. High up, happily in the heat of the Pyrenees today. It can be extremely cold on these mountain stages when the clouds fly in and ruins our visibility, which means our helicopters can't fly either, but no problems today. Visibility is superb. In fact, our camera's cutting away that to look like the Plateau de Bailly. In fact, it must be the top of the Col de Porte, which is some 44 kilometers away from us. This is George Hincapie at the front, setting pace again. Surprising everybody, the man we always regard as the flattish classic single-day rider with the sprint, now pacing on a mountain here, which just shows the strength in depth of that team, US Postal Services. Sylvain Chavanel of the Bonjour team, a young rider in his first Tour de France, being tipped for great things. They're saying that one day this man will be on the podium in Paris, but he's finding it very hard this time around. He hangs on to the tail of the bunch. So the peloton slowly but surely grinding the way up the Col de Porte. At the last time check we've got, it's 4 minutes 38 seconds on these 3 riders. They're much nearer the summit now, and Jalabert itching to get up here and grab the points, because he's already moved into the lead in the King of the Mountains today. A polka dot jersey awaits him at the finish, but more points he gets now, the less he'll have to do when we go to the Alps next week.
Jalabert looks very comfortable on today's stage, Phil, which is quite remarkable when you think of the effort that he had to put in yesterday. This climb is a climb of 12.6 kilometers. It's not really all that steep. It's an average gradient of 4.9%, but at the summit these riders are at 1,250 meters, which is pretty close to 5,000 feet in altitude. So quite a long, hard day in the saddle, and this is the 4th climb of the day these riders have had to drag themselves over, but it's the last one of the day, the Plateau de Bailly, which is going to make the absolute big difference.
Well, very shortly he's going to see 1 kilometer to the summit. He's not too far away from it now. I don't think Nozal will do anything at the back. He's not done anything all day, but I don't think he'll try to steal any points off Jalabert, because that won't go down too well. He'll just sit there at the back and he'll just try and keep out of the way. At the moment Jalabert has 122 points to Patrice Algon's 57. David Echeverria is 52. Dufaux is climbing into the scene. He's 4th with 51. But I must say that at the moment, on the second category climb, he's got another 20 waiting for him if he can win.
I think he'll win. I think, don't forget, Laurent Jalabert in the early part of his career was an absolutely superb sprinter. And if anybody tries to get close to him, he can blow them away. They've all been working very hard since the start of today's stage. And Jalabert is the man who's setting the majority of the tempo on the front here. I don't think any of these men are thinking in the back of their minds that they want to try and get points in the King of the Mountains competition. Jalabert wants to get maximum points, and he wants to win this stage as well because of yesterday's attack. He feels today he deserves the win, and there's confirmation. No challenge at all.
That's the way it should be. If you do all the work, you take home the dinner. And over the top goes Laurent Jalabert, followed by Laurent Dufaux, followed by the ticket collector at the back today, Isidro Nozal. And in fact, you've got to remember, this guy is a very young rider, one of the young riders of the race, and he's doing an outstanding performance in his first Tour de France. He would, I'm quite sure, help out if he wasn't riding under orders from the team not to help out, because there's a danger Jalabert could finish this race today 5 minutes ahead, and that would bring another man into play.
Well, the thing is, his team manager, Isidro Nozal's team manager, knows Laurent Jalabert very well, because Manolo Sainz was Laurent Jalabert's team manager for many years. And there must have been something very strange went on between them as they separated towards the end of a couple of years ago, because neither of them has ever spoken about the reason why Jalabert left the team, or the reason why Manolo Sainz, in fact, allowed him to leave after being such a successful bike rider for Team Once. And even just recently I read an article about Manolo Sainz and asked why there'd been the separation. He said, "I respect the man to absolute perfection, but I cannot say what went on between us." This is the descent where the riders now should not lose any of their advantage at all. They went over the top there, you see, with still a time advantage of 4 minutes 53 seconds. This descent is approximately 17 kilometers long, so there should be no problem at all. Those men at the front will go off this mountain at an average speed of between 50 and 60 miles an hour, while meantime in the main field there's no need at all for these men to lift up the pacemaking, because none of those men in front, Nozal, Jalabert or Dufaux, are really of any threat at all to Lance Armstrong's lead.
Floyd Landis setting the pace at the front. Axel Merckx off to the left of our picture there. Be a little while yet before they cross over the top. I would think about another 3 minutes or so. Lance on the right, Armstrong, and he too looks very comfortable. This is another mountain they can tick off. There's only one left, which is the highest point we'll have climbed so far in this year's Tour de France, at 1,780 meters. Just a little bit higher than where we finished on the Col de Tourmalet yesterday at the town of La Mongie.
I think this is actually a much harder climb, because they start at a lower altitude than they did just yesterday. This is Brylant on the front here, moving forward, having a look over his shoulder to see where Axel Merckx is. The main field now within the last kilometre of the penultimate climb of the day, the summit of the Col de Port, and still a large number of riders in with a chance of staying in contact with the yellow jersey. But when they get to the first slopes of the final climb of the day, the Plateau de Bay, it is going to be a literal explosion on the side of the Pyrenees, because it is an unbelievably difficult climb, and you get a chance to see there the backdrop here, Phil. It really is a magnificent day.
It is, and Dave Bryland's setting a nice pace up on the left. Axel Merckx coming back on the other far left here. His dad's commentating just down from us now as the riders come up. The great Eddie Merckx, Andrea Perron, also having an excellent tour, is the rider setting the pace for CSC. So they're getting a little bit irritated as they come up towards the sprints. No sign of Patrice Algol, who is actually the leader of the King of the Mountains. Now, if he's in the bunch, a sprint now would keep him in the play, but otherwise he's falling away from that competition. I'm not actually sure, Paul, he's even here.
He had a very hard time earlier on in the day. He was actually left behind on one of the early ascents. Axel Merckx is accelerating there towards the front, and maybe just to help out Richard Virenque, who seems to have been picking up the lesser points out on the course. Virenque is the leader of the team, wears number 71, and I think he's just tucked into second place there behind Axel.
As the clock counts down at the time since the three leaders went over the top, they're still playing the game in case Richard Virenque rides better in the Alps than he's done here in the Pyrenees. He was in the breakaway, he's going for it now, and he's racing for the 4th place points on the top of the climb, and it looks like he's going to get them. He has won the King of the Mountains 5 times, and they certainly sprint a long way out, but he's got it this time. He's cracked the rider who's going behind him, and cheered all the way over by a very vociferous crowd. Around about 4:35 the time gap.
You've also got to be very careful of Richard Viron when he makes these accelerations, because if his legs were feeling good right now, he would continue his effort over the summit of this climb and try and take some advantage over everybody on the descent. I don't think he'll do that right now. I think he's much more comfortable riding in the main pack with Armstrong and his men.
Well, as they come together, Carlos Sastre was the rider taking on Richard Viron, the man that had the boxing gloves on a bit earlier when he was fighting with Christophe Moreau. But he's just joined Richard Viron on the descent of the Col de Port. Viron goes over in 4th place, and the gap very manageable at just on 4 3/4 minutes to the leaders of the Tour today on the road. And just to remind you that Laurent Jalabert out front started the day 5 minutes and 53 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. He's currently clawed back 4 minutes 39 of them, and there is a bonus for the win as well. So it's very close to him taking the race lead if it survives, but I somehow don't think so.
Well, nobody's taking any risks on this descent right now because everyone knows exactly what's in store for them. The Plateau de Bay has been, the Tour de France has been there once before. That was in 1998, but it is a climb that many of the riders know very well, Phil, because a famous race here called the Route du Sud comes here very often. Armstrong staying near the front end of the main field, always surrounded by the blue train US Postal Service. His teammates doing a superb job looking after him, keeping him at the front of this main peloton. They ride a lonely race right now because they don't have that many people who are able to come up alongside and have a chat with them. And Armstrong is completely focused on the job in hand. He knows that the attacks will come on the final climb of the day, but he also knows that his men are in absolute tip-top condition right now. Now it looks like there's a move coming off the front here. Axel Merckx is in 2nd position there, and it seems as if one of the Domo Farm Freaks riders wants to try and launch himself off the front. Now this is a good move by Axel Merckx, and he could get himself a bit of an advantage before we get to the bottom.
Well, this is going to give Dad Eddie something to talk about, Paul, as he starts to go. Axel Merckx, stage winner in the past.
Merckx is in 2nd place, Virenque is in 4th or 5th, Carlos Sastre is there as well, and looking over their shoulders they can see they've actually opened up the gap on the US Postal Service men. And I have a feeling that there's no real need to chase these guys either, because also just nicking into that group is Andrea Piron. There you can get a chance to see as they go around one of these unbelievable hairpin bends that those 5 men have opened up themselves a gap of around about 12 seconds over the main field, which currently is being still led, as it has been for the whole of today's stage, by the team of Lance Armstrong US Postal.
Merckx's best finish, 10th in the Tour de France, which he did his first Tour de France for me, 1998. Rather struggled since then. He got 22nd last year. Now the field descending the Col de Port. Time to have a nice deep breath and enjoy the descent, but you must not relax your concentration. Yesterday a number of riders crashed on the Col de Soulor. Jonathan Waters of the United States crashed and went out. Michael Sandstad, the champion of Denmark, he crashed, broke 8 ribs and went to hospital by helicopter, so obviously he was out. Jan Ullrich was dropped and eliminated, or at least gave up. He wasn't eliminated, he stopped on the roadside. Other riders who crashed and continued, though, the most remarkable one I think was Bradley McGee. I think McGee was on the ride of his life yesterday, crossing the gap to the leaders, completely made a mistake. He looked over his shoulder at a motorbike, lost his line on a corner and had a terribly heavy fall which tore his jersey to shreds, and so the Sydney sider was in all sorts of bother there, but he was at least man enough to say it was my fault, and most riders would always blame somebody else.
Well, it's so easy to do because you're going downhill so fast, and all you have to do is just look over your shoulder for a fraction and then you can completely lose your line in the corner. But he did manage to finish the day and survived quite admirably, and he's doing a good ride today on the roads of the Tour de France, and I have to take my hat off to him because he's hoping after this year's Tour to go to Manchester and ride the Commonwealth Games on the track, and that's a completely different effort to what he's going through right now, because this is the toughest thing to do.
Yeah, it certainly is. Chance there to see the rider take drinks out the bottles on the move, as we're back with the 3 leaders here. Sorat is where we are at the moment, as we see Laurent Jalabert. Now, he's been in this position yesterday, remember. He was on his own and he was hoping it was all going to happen for him. He had the same sort of time advantage, and then it all went wrong just a couple of kilometers from the summit of the finish on the Col du Tourmalet. At the moment, he's got 4.5 minutes in the beauty of the Pyrenees as the peloton courses its way like a giant snake, heading down the Col de Port and heading into the lovely little town of Tarascon before they start the climb at Les Cabanes, as they start the climb up towards the finish, where a massive crowd awaits to cheer the riders every inch of the way.
See how difficult it is for the motorbike to get away from the riders on a descent like this. You can hear the horn of the motorbike trying to encourage everybody to get out of the way. We're looking now at incredible speeds. It looks like Axel Merckx's huge Longines figure going down there very rapidly. And one thing you must always remember about these descents in the Tour de France is there's no protection at the side of the road for these riders. If you go off this road, there is nothing there at all to help you or to stop you going down even further.
Well, I'll tell you what, Merckx has come down this like a stone as he's dropped down. He's gone through all of the motorbikes who couldn't accelerate out of his way. This little group has got to 4:31 behind the leaders, and surprisingly, no one really expected an attack to slip away off the front coming up the Col de Port, but Merckx has decided he wanted to do this. He's decided to go for gold today, and if he can reach the climb of the Plateau de Bailly, remember he's lying in 22nd place overall. He's just over 8 minutes off the yellow jersey of Armstrong, so Armstrong will not rally the troops yet. He's not that important at the moment. Merckx thinking more of a stage win than a high finish just now. And he's got a couple of teammates just trying to get on terms with him here, because he has put in a wonderful descent.
Well, he's really taken risks. In fact, the rest of his teams, I think it's Richard Virenque who's not able to follow him, so that would be Brylant in second place. But Merckx is going down this like a stone right now. It's a good place to attack, because if he waited till the bottom of the climb, then the pressure that would be set by Lance Armstrong's US Postal Service team would make it almost impossible to launch a surprise attack. So in fact, Merckx is making a good tactical decision right now to try and get himself a 30 or 40 second advantage before this final climb of the day starts.
Meanwhile, Tête de la Course, the head of the race, and it's 32 kilometers to the finish. 16 of those are where you need your crampons and chains, because it is a most difficult climb to the line. As we look now at the rear here at Isidre Nozel of the Oncé team. Number 51 is Laurent Jalabert of CSC. It's a Danish setup, by the way. Laurent, of course, is French. Just to complicate matters worse, he lives in Switzerland. And the Swiss rider on the front is Laurent Dufaux, and they know each other very well indeed. Good pacemaking by Laurent Dufaux here, not looking like a man who's weakening at all. We just do not know how Nozel is going, because he sat at the back ever since he joined the leaders in defence of Joseba Beloki back in the field along with Lance.
Well, it'll be interesting to see just exactly how he does perform, but I would think if he tries to attack on the early slopes, you will see a very angry Laurent Jalabert pulling him back into the fold quite quickly. In fact, getting a quick glimpse here, I think it may well be Thomas Konechny who's gone across here with Axel Merckx. A little bit further back is Richard Virenque, but he's having a hard time staying in contact. And further back, having been left behind by this incredible descent of Axel Merckx, is André Perron and Carlos Sastre.
Well, this is Merckx, the little sleeve cuffs there showing the stripes of the Belgian flag, indicating a past champion of his country at the sport of cycling. He was in fact a very good footballer at the high level too, but chose cycling as his #1 sport, and the football being the type we play in Britain rather than the type one plays in America with the rather odd shaped ball. As we continue on the descent here now, this is the peloton, and a little group trying to get away. They won't chase it down by US Postal. It doesn't serve to give them any advantage to chase down Merckx and the breakaway at the moment. Interesting move though. Carlos Sastre is in there. He's a good rider, and he's the number 3 on the team behind Tyler Hamilton and Laurent Jalabert, currently lying in 19th place in the overall classification too.
Well, it's probably an ideal time to try and slip away from what has been a very attentive US Postal Service on the front end of the main field. That's where we're heading to right now. This is the next small town the riders will go through. This is Bedayac-et-Agnon. Very shortly they will then head into the slightly larger town of Tarascon-sur-Ariège, and then there's a long drag up through the valley for the riders as they head towards Les Cabanes, and it's from Les Cabanes that the road tips right the way up to the skies for 16 kilometers or 10 miles, and that's going to be a real hard slog up to the finish line here.
Yes, enjoy the sight of the peloton in the Tour de France. It won't be there for very much longer. A lot of riders here at the moment, and they're still coming back. As they slip off the back, they do rejoin on the descent. They take a little bit more risk than the others to latch back on, knowing they'll probably be uncoupled again on the last climb, but that's not important. They can then ride up to the finishing line, losing only time, but not the day to fight again, because they'll beat the elimination time. Lance Armstrong right at the back of the 9 riders on his team, including himself. 11 teams still have 9 men in this year's Tour de France, which is quite unusual at this stage of the race, and 2 teams have only 7 left. The Once team gathering force now, all of their riders gathering out their man, Joseba Beloki, in the wake of US Postal. So the big battle is about to begin. They have 1 man up the road in Isidro Nozal, who I think will try to attack and go alone to the finish, but not yet. Here we are, back with the leaders now. Been another very quick race today. They've been keeping the average speed up. 4 minutes 15 seconds, the latest check, over the 2 riders who are chasing behind.
I have a feeling that other group of 3, Perron, Sastre and Virenque, have actually been brought back into the main field. So the race situation just now is the 3 leaders chased by Konechny and Axel Merckx, and then the whole of the main field charging down. And it was interesting to note a quick glimpse as we looked at the riders making up that peloton still contain the green jersey of Eric Zabel. Zabel riding an excellent race this year, getting himself over some very difficult mountains today, and still holding on to his green jersey point competition by a single point from Robbie McEwen. That's a story to follow.
Yeah, all the way to the finish. There's the latest, 4:07 for the chasers, 4:40. These are the 2 chasers here now, and 4:40 to the main field. So Axel Merckx is persisting and just trying to keep the pressure on here with Konechny. And nice to see a 2-man team time trial at this stage of the Tour de France. It could well be, if they can get it together, Paul, they'll cross the gap. They're only riding about 35 seconds in front of the peloton, and you see this little contour won't count as far as any mountain points continue today, but the roads now remain undulating and heavy as we gradually make our way down to Tarascon and onto Les Cabanes. That's where the climb starts.
Nice to be able to just be a fly on the wall in the Belgian commentary position right now, just to see what Eddie's having to say about his son. He always gets very emotional when Axel gets on the attack. He was commentating when Axel won the Belgian national championships, and over the last couple of kilometers he was unable to talk anymore at all. He's a big bear of a man these days, but he's still very emotional when it comes down to watching his son Axel race, and he will be pleased and proud of the move that Axel has taken there, because he knows that's a sensible attack to try and get clear before the early kilometers of this very final climb of the day, the Plateau de Bay. This is not too far away now from Tarascon, because it's just at the end of the small big dual carriageway we drove down onto this morning.
And we're hearing that the peloton is slowly but surely hauling in those 2 riders behind. We might get a picture of that shortly, as the latest time check shown to the 3 leaders. Still good news. Jalabert will be happy with that as he drives on through again, saying, well, that's a little bit better than it was yesterday. I've got a chance. This is Tarascon now as the riders come off the back of the Col de Port. The railway on the left there. The very, very nice railway station here in this Pyrenean town, and they'll be held at the level crossing so the riders can go through anyway. Latest update now, because Nozal at the back will know too that he has a real chance of winning this stage. He must have fresh legs, as fresh as one can have after a day of crossing the Pyrenees at these speeds. It looks as though Merckx knows it's all over. They're right behind the peloton, so it's a freewheel job now before they get swept up.
Well, he must have looked back, I think, over his shoulder and seen that the main field was slowly but surely charging down upon them, because the main field's last official time check was given as just 10 seconds behind the group of Konechny and Axel Merckx. So Axel using the better part of valor there, realizing the important thing about the Tour de France is not to insist in a breakaway like this if you're not building up an advantage over the main field. And there they are right now. His former teammates, some of them actually chasing him down, because Axel raced alongside Lance Armstrong for a couple of years when he raced for the Motorola team. And Hincapie at the front of the group there. This is Yaroslav Ekimov slightly moving off the front here, but realizing that everybody quite happy now to just, I think, have a moment of truce, Phil, before we come to the very difficult climb, which is going to blow this race to pieces. Probably turn the overall standings again upside down.
Looking at Ekimov there as he stretches his back. So they've caught Axel Merckx. This is the face of Thomas Konechny, riding his first Tour de France, Czech Republic rider. He's sticking to his guns. He was with Axel Merckx, but I think he should look over his shoulder, because they're right there behind him, about 10 seconds, I would say, as he now descends into the town of Tarascon. We've seen the leaders, or Tarascon rather, as we've seen the leaders go through there. The watches will be running 4 minutes 19, the latest check. It might be enough, although we've seen the climb, and it is very, very hard indeed today. There'll be plenty of people to shout for Laurent Jalabert. There'll be plenty of people too to shout for Nozel, because the Spanish rider will have a lot of support on this climb.